Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in this world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm your moderator, Charlene O'Hanlon, and I welcome you to today's event. We have a great webinar on tap today, really interesting stuff. But before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, just know you'll be able to access it on demand. Later on today, hopefully, we'll be sending out an email that will include a link to enable you to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during the presentation you have a question for our panelists, don't delay. Go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question. We'll take probably about 15 minutes or so near the end and go through the audience questions. Okay, with that, I would like to go ahead and kick off today's webinar event, which is the 2018 State of DevOps Report, Essential Database Practices for Successful Software Delivery. Our speakers today are Dr. Nicole Forsgren, who is CEO and Chief Scientist at the DevOps Research and Assessment, DORA, and Robert Reeves, who is co-founder and CTO at Datical. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining me today. Great to have you.
Thanks so much for having us. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Well, Nicole, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you because I know you're going to be doing the driving.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. How about you, Robert?
I'm pumped. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
To get to talk about all things DevOps.
I know. Okay, so thank you so much for kicking us off. So as she mentioned, we're going to run through the webinar. We'll have time for Q&A at the back. And I wanted to make sure that we touched on it because I always forget at the end the cool stuff we have coming up, right? So we have DevOps Enterprise Summit coming up in Las Vegas in October, and DORA is going to be there, and I know Datical is going to be there. So if anyone else is coming, you should come find us. We always want to chat and visit about all the cool DevOps stuff that we see. And Datical's got a great demo that you can always check out. So I know we'll be covering essential database practices, and if anyone has additional questions, you can check that out at datical.com/demo. So we mentioned brief introductions, but I wanted to make sure that we can also cover some of that. So I am Nicole Forsgren. I'm the lead investigator on this report, and I have been for the last 5 years. So I also run DORA, which is myself, Jez Humble, Jean Kim. I'm also a Diet Coke lover. Clearly, I wrote this slide. R2, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, look, it's how do I follow that? I mean, I wanted to put something cheeky on this, but I couldn't.
Like software stuff. I also used to write software. It's fine.
Well, yeah, I used to, but they fired me. They said, no, you go do webinars, Robert.
I know. But you also do like software and databases.
Well, absolutely. I mean, look, I've been a release manager since the late 90s. And, this has been something that, whether it's getting software out the door or database changes, this is something that I've struggled with for, can I say decades now?
We've been computering for a while.
Yeah, I've done it once or twice.
And we've been helping other people computer for a while.
Yes.
It's a good way to put it. Okay. So quickly about DORA, as I mentioned, it's myself, Jean Kim, Jez Humble. We've been doing the annual State of DevOps reports for the last 5 years. And we also have customized commercial assessments to help drive strategy and help companies benchmark against their industry peers. Our customers include some of the best, most innovative organizations in several industries, includes finance like Capital One, healthcare like Merck, telecommunications like Verizon, retail like Starbucks, government organizations all around the world. So that's kind of a quick about DORA. Do you want to introduce Datical?
Sure. So Datical, at the end of the day, what we're going to do is align your database changes with those application code changes. What we've heard from a lot of our customers is that once they have accelerated the rate at which they get the application out, the next problem they need to tackle is the database. So this is our NASCAR slide. All the folks that we work with, all the folks that wanted to bring us in as a customer, and some folks in the lower left that are saying nice stuff about us. You know, look, at the end of the day, you're going to realize that with DevOps, it is not oh, I'm doing DevOps and then 3 months later I'm done with it. It is a process. And as part of that process, you might run into challenges with the database, and that is what we help our customers resolve.
Okay, so let's dig into it. Now, for this year's report, this is the largest and longest running research of its kind. And I use the word research pretty specifically, right? So this is academically rigorous research. This is 5 years of research covering over 30,000 professionals worldwide. What we do is we look at practices that really lead to and are predictive of higher software delivery performance. And we'll dig into what that actually means and how that leads to strong and powerful business outcomes, things that really show up on the bottom line for organizations. This is the only report that helps you benchmark how you compare against the industry, and it's data-driven, statistically rigorous benchmarks that we drive with cluster analysis. And as I mentioned before, this is predictive analysis to really help you identify specific improvement strategies to help you drive performance across your organization. Now, 2018, some of the key themes is STO performance. So whenever I say STO performance, this is software delivery and operational performance. Now, this is some things that unlock competitive advantage. So this is the practice about not just creating, but also operating software in ways that generate powerful business outcomes. So in the past, we talked about software development and delivery. This year, we extend that in ways to include availability. So we'll talk about that today. We also talk about strong technical practices that drive STO performance. So we extend on previous research. So research is very much like technical practices, right? So we iterate and we improve as we go. So we extended our previous research to include additional technical practices. These additional technical practices include monitoring the observability, continuous testing, database change management, which we'll dig into in detail today, and shifting left on security. Now, we have done some shifting left on security in previous years. This year, we dig into it and extend on it. We also dig into cultural practices. Again, we've done some work on cultural practices, but this year we dig into it some more to really understand in additional detail how we can influence the culture in organizations. So the two things that we dig into are looking at how we can influence it through autonomy and trust, and creating a culture of learning through retrospectives in particular. And this is interesting because when we first looked into cultures of learning, that was in the 2014 study. So it was nice to be able to revalidate those findings this year, 5 years later. Now, some of our key findings, when we compare our highest performers, which we call elite performers this year, and our low performers, here's what we find. We see that in terms of speed and stability, again, we reaffirm that speed and stability move together. And when we look at our speed metrics, we see that the highest performers are able to deliver code 46 times more frequently. So that's huge in terms of value delivery. We also see that lead time from code commit to code deploy, code running in production, we see is over 2,500 times faster. This is huge in terms of being able to get code to market faster, beating our competitors, delighting our customers, keeping up with compliance and regulatory changes. It's huge. And it's not just on the development side, that's also on the operations side, right? Because we have to deliver patches to our infrastructure, several types of things. Now, when we look at our stability side, we're seeing 2,600 times faster time to recover from incidents and a 7 times lower change fail rate. Now, this isn't just massive failures. These are any type of incidents that happen when we introduce our code to production. When we take a look at the trends year over year, we see pretty interesting trends when we compare our highest performers to our low performers. In terms of our speed metrics, right, the orange and the blue, those two triangles on the left, they've remained relatively constant, right? Pretty strong performance from our high performers compared to our low performers. It's really interesting when we look at our stability metrics, the two measures on the right. We're seeing growing complexity, probably growing complexity, contributing to falling stability measures, right? Low performers just aren't keeping up very well. And we're really seeing that impact our low performers. They just can't keep up. And so, we really caution low performers to get it together, right? We really, it's hard, right? And I say this with love, right? This isn't a scolding, but we really need to make sure that we focus on getting to higher performance. And now people are going to be like, well, how, right? I can't just do it. The nice thing about the report is that it allows you to understand where you are, look at figuring out if you're a low performer, a medium performer, a high performer, an elite performer, and then give you actionable insights through core capabilities in technical practices, lean and agile practices, and cultural practices, because these are predictive of improving performance.
And Nicole, I look at that slide and it reminds me of all those times where I got in trouble as a kid and my parents said, well, I'm not going to punish you because you've punished yourself enough. And it's like the folks that aren't high performers, they really are punishing themselves. They're really doing this to themselves and not taking advantage of these things.
Right.
Yeah,
well, it's so funny, right? It's like when your mom is mad at you, it's one thing, but when your mom is disappointed in you.
Oh, yes.
Right? It's tough. It's tough.
It's the worst.
It's tough. And the other thing is that I really, like, at this point, particularly as I watch this year-over-year trend, this is what I was worried before, but now I'm like legit worried about some of the low performers, because like now we're really entering territory where, was it Deming that said like survival isn't mandatory?
Mm-hmm.
Like we really need to start seeing organizations that just are not focusing and that aren't doubling down, right? I mean, it comes down to execution, it comes down to work, but like at some point, it's going to be really tough to dig yourself out of this hole.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
There is a way. You can do it, but it's going to be hard. There is a way,
but you can't fool yourself into thinking like all is rosy and all is fine. I mean, we've been through technology busts before where masses of organizations failed and they were convinced that they wouldn't. Finance had the same thing. There were like swaths of banks that failed. Like there are things that are not recoverable if you continue to ignore. So, okay. Key differences in this year's report that I think are interesting to point out for people who have seen previous year's reports or who have read Accelerate. And Accelerate is the book that we put out that summarized the 2014 through 2017 report. So the difference in 2018, here are some things. We added availability. So in previous years, so far, I've talked about speed and stability, right? So I talked about lead time, deployment frequency, change fail rate, time to restore. We added availability. And here's why. Availability is the promises that we make to our customers. It's about making and keeping these assertions to our customers about the services that we deliver. And so we added this, we collected this measure, and we found that it's a very strong measure. And when we add this to our construct, right, to our measure about service delivery, we find a few things, right? So there are a few reasons for capturing it from a research standpoint, from a literature standpoint, from an industry standpoint, right? There are several reasons for us to consider it. And then we also find out that it helps us predict organizational performance better. And that makes sense, right? I mean, Robert, you and I were talking about this earlier. This makes sense because if it's about making and keeping promises to customers about their service staying up, of course that would help us predict things like profitability and productivity and customer satisfaction better. And what we also find is that elite performers are 3 times more likely to have strong availability practices, right? Because again, it's about keeping your systems up and available and strong and reliable. And for anyone who's familiar with SRE, this is a very strong SRE concept, right? Site reliability engineering.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, it's.
And when we were talking about this, you immediately chimed in with like, this is a great database concept. And so I was so happy that we were able to kind of like talk about this as well.
Well, I mean, you're talking about, I love this concept of making promises and keeping them. And this is, I believe strongly in that, my word is my bond. But I do want to point out that an SLA isn't a promise, it's a bare minimum,
Yeah.
And right now what's happening is that we are getting better at getting our applications out the door, those compiled bits. And we're not, but they don't work unless we update the database as well. And so what's happening is that we're starting to see that, the development team, application development is saying, well, okay, I've got the compiled bits out, we're done. Sure, the application won't run because those database changes are taking forever to get done, but I'm finished, but development teams need to be held accountable all the way to production. Just because you've kicked it over to the test team, your world is okay. You're not keeping a promise. And so what I'm seeing is these promises getting broken from our database professionals, from our application development folks. And at the end of the day, it's not a promise internally. It's the promise to the customer. That's what really matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the nice thing is that helps round out our software and our experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. Okay, so I've talked about our elite performers, right? So here we have the data this year kind of shows a new fourth high performance group. And I said kind of, right? So here I'm going to walk through that. So we've got our low performers, our medium performers, and our high performers. And then I've got these elite performers. So it's really interesting because this high performance group is so big this year, right? And so I was so excited when I saw this because it's so encouraging. And it's encouraging because what it's telling us, it's signaling so strong that this is all possible, right? We've been telling everyone this is possible. It's hard work, right? It's work, right? You need to put in the work of doing the technical practices, doing the re-engineering, the reprocess work, investing in your culture, but getting better is absolutely possible. And so we're seeing this big, almost, I'm going to say migration, right? You're seeing this migration of all of these data points into this high performance group, and it's growing so big. But then it almost, I'm going to say but, right? It almost looked like the average, the median of performance dropped. It didn't drop. It's just that group got so big, right? And so I took another look and I realized that the highest, like the high performers, were still optimizing for speed and stability. They were still maximizing on all of these measures, just like they had been for the last 5 years. Absolutely. And I was like, oh, this is amazing, right? We still have this group that's like kicking butt and taking names, right? This is amazing. It's like, this is incredible.
Well, I think it just speaks to really the human experience. I mean, everybody prior to the first person that ran the 5-minute mile, there were people saying, oh, it's impossible. The human body can't go that fast. And then somebody does it. And the next thing you know, everybody's beating it. Once you have one group, one person, one company gets better, everybody else strives for that. And I think that's what DevOps allows you to do. It allows you to continue to optimize. And I think that speaks to DevOps not being something that you implement and you're done. This is not like PCI compliance. This is not some ISO compliance. All right. This is, this is an algorithm. This is something that you're going to continually use to reevaluate how you get software out the door, and you're going to get better and better with these tools. If you choose to ignore it, you are going to be a low performer, and bad things are going to happen to your company.
Yeah, and it's going to be difficult, and it's going to get more difficult because the environment that we operate in and the world that we live in is continuing to push forward, right? The environment that we're in continually gets more complex. The environment and the world that we're in continues to push for and ask for more things and expect for more things, right? Customer demands more and more things, right? Like back when I was in college, right? Like dial-up was fine. The slow internet was fine. Customers no longer accept that. And so low performers continue to fall farther and farther behind. So this spread, remember that year over year, all those triangles we saw a minute ago, that spread continues to grow. So the high performers continue to keep up and catch up and push, while the low performers who want to keep doing things the old way because it was fine 10 years ago, it's no longer fine. It's no longer good enough. It's really interesting. Now, let's move on to key topics of interest. Some really interesting things that we pulled out this year. I was so excited about this year's report. I love this year's report. I get research nerd excitement. Okay, so the benchmarks. Everyone loves to take a look at this. I joke it's the eye chart because like I have to shove so much small text on this. I'm sorry, everybody. But here's what we see. Elite performers, again, optimizing for speed and stability. There are no trade-offs. Please note, there are not trade-offs here, right? You get speed, you get stability, you get all of it. So go ahead and take a look. Where do your teams fall? And again, this is at the team level. This is not at the organization level, because organizations are made up of teams that might be all over the spectrum. See where your teams might fall.
And I do want to point out, lead time for changes, that's from checked it into source code control and it's out to production.
Yep,
just delivering
exactly.
it to the test team, that's not good enough, kids. You got to go all the way.
Yep, exactly. Code commit to code deploy. Now, I also am glad that you mentioned that because it's code commit to code deploy. We don't go farther up the chain because, now that's super important, but that is less predictable. That's a creative process, that's R&D. It is very important, but there is much more variability in that process, and we expect there to be, right? So code commit to code deploy, that's the part of the process that can be much more refined and predictable and engineered. The other part of the process is creative. We expect more variability. Okay. Now, oh, I love this. Also, I hate this. So we, and by hate, I mean like, oh, frustrating. This is my favorite gotcha. We asked respondents if they were doing cloud. And then later we asked them each of the 5 portions on the right for the primary product or service they were working on, if they were doing each of these things, right? On-demand self-service, like, okay, if you're using tickets, you are like immediately disqualified.
Boo, tickets.
Right, boo ticket. People can't be involved, right? Broad network access, right? So you have to be able to access it from like several different devices. Resource pooling, rapid elasticity, measured service. So, by the way, all of this comes from NIST, okay? This is the definition of what the cloud is. I love Corey Quinn. Corey Quinn read through the report and then he sent out a tweet that was like, you can't just slap a sticker on your data center and call it the cloud. Because by the way, like you can't do private cloud. Private cloud is totally fine. But whether it's private cloud or public cloud, finger quotes, you're not doing the cloud unless you're doing all 5 of these completely. So get this, only 22% of teams that said they were doing the cloud, that thought they were doing the cloud. Now listen, it might not be your fault, right? Like your organization might have some rules or whatever, right? Like let's go ahead and give yourself an out. Unless you're doing all 5 of these, you're not doing the cloud. I award you 0 points, and may God have mercy on your soul. Cite Billy Madison. But get this is also really interesting. I work with so many organizations that say, well, we went to the cloud and we didn't see any benefits. We didn't see all the magic fairy dust that everyone says. Well, get this, unless you're doing all 5 of these, you're not going to get the benefits. And here's what we also found. Teams that did do all 5 of these, all 5 essential characteristics of cloud computing, according to NIST, were 23 times more likely to be elite performers. Well, there you go. If you want to reap the benefits of cloud computing, you have to actually be doing cloud computing. Like, so there you go.
So if I want to get in shape, I just can't go to the gym and hang out in the sauna. I actually have to use the machines.
Or like even better, if you want the benefits of the gym, you can't just buy a gym membership and then never go.
Yeah. Or you can't just use it for one part of your company.
Right.
Oh, dev team's using it, we're good. But everything else requires a ticket.
Exactly. Or you can't just buy the gym membership and go in January and then not go the rest of the year. So I mean, that's this. And so often when I tell people, especially lately, like this is my latest drum I'm banging on. Yes, it is difficult, but it comes down to execution. This is possible for everyone, but we have to execute. We have to do the work, right? This is what we have to do. Okay. Next up, open source software. We see this year that use of open source is highly correlated with STO performance. And teams that are using open source extensively are 1.7 times more likely to be elite performers. And those same teams are 1.5 times more likely to be expanding their open source usage. So the teams that are already extensively using it are still planning on expanding that usage in key portions of their stack, which is really interesting. Also, industry doesn't matter, which is my favorite, like, no excuses portion of my talk, because everyone will come back, they'll be like, oh, but I'm highly regulated. Oh, but yeah, no, let's just stop. It's fine, right? I did really rigorous analysis this year for stats nerds in the building. I took all industries, I think what 12-ish, and I used them as control variables against STO analysis, or STO performance rather. Not a single one of them was statistically significant, right? That's as rigorous as I can get. Like there's nothing that holds.
No excuses.
No excuses. Thanks. Try again. Love you. Bye. I really do. Also, no. Like I know you think it matters. Also, there's someone in your industry that's kicking butt and taking names. Also, there's someone in a more highly regulated field, right? There's always someone in finance who's like, we're highly regulated. I'm like, yeah, there's also someone in like healthcare and pharma who, by the way, is way more highly regulated, right? Like they're dealing with like drugs and highly regulated studies and like lives, and they're killing it. So sorry. Like I will look real polite and concerned and also be like, nope, super nope. Also, I love you. Still no. Okay, don't forget the database. So this is interesting, right? Because I've been having conversations with people around data and database and like what this looks like. We investigated test data management 2 years ago and found that that was important and interesting, but we wanted to expand it this year. And we found that integrated database work is predictive and positively predictive. So this is important to contributing to STO performance. So what does this look like? What we need to do here is involve teams, do things like communication, config management, include the teams, do visibility. And I love this because this is so much like core DevOps, right? It's like, what is DevOps? DevOps is rolling ops early into the dev process, right? Or when we talk about shifting left on security, we do the same thing. This is basically very, very much like shifting left, right? Talk about the database and what those changes are going to look like early in the dev process. talk about rolling database into config management early in the process, including those teams. Now, what those teams look like in a large organization, that might be the DBA. But what if you don't have a dedicated DBA? Talk to whomever is in charge of database schema changes early in the process, right? Don't find an excuse to not include that person. And very, very importantly, make sure there is visibility to what those database changes look like throughout the process, right? Just like we do for everything else, which is so important because we've had, the visibility of changes for application code all the way through the CI/CD, ARA process be so important for the last 4 years. All of these things show up as being fundamentally, foundationally important for the database, which I was like, dope.
Well, I certainly appreciated that.
Right? Well, it's like it touches on so many foundational things, right, that we see.
I think it really speaks to the fact that, if you're looking at DevOps and you're seeing value in it from the application perspective, this is proving out that there's no reason why it can't be applied to other parts. Certainly Forrester had a analyst report saying that, look, there's no reason why you can't apply this stuff to the mainframe. This, survey is showing that there's no reason why you can't apply these learnings to the database. No reason. If you try to come up with a reason, you're just making an excuse so you don't have to change. And okay, but understand there's going to be consequences. Your company will not perform as high as it can, and one of your competitors is going to do this. So, when it comes to communication, config management, including teams, visibility, we take that stuff very seriously at Datical. And so we've got some stuff in the product that we've tried to help our customers hit these 4 things. So when it comes to config management, it's all about taking an artifact and moving it through the delivery, that pipeline, all right, that software delivery lifecycle. And so for us, what we're able to do is take a SQL script, you check it into source code control, and from there, Datical is going to create an immutable object. We're going to create an artifact that goes from environment to environment. So there are no longer any humans involved with actually executing that change. You're enforcing that config management, that artifact is going to be the same from environment to environment. We were talking about waiting until the end to have a DBA review a script, and that's not good enough. We have to shift left. And so the way we've done that at Datical is with our rules engine that takes all the things that a DBA is looking for, not just naming conventions. Tables must start with T underscore, but also things that are contextual. So for example, making certain that if you add a foreign key, the columns that are part of that foreign key already have an index, or making certain that we don't add more than X indexes to a table, because you can get to a point where too many indexes actually slows performance. These are things that DBAs are looking for, and we're creating tickets today to figure out, and there's no reason to. And we should also allow our customers to write rules themselves. Why have us enforce the rules? They know what they're doing, so let's allow them a way to enforce it. When it comes to visibility, allowing people to really understand what change is happening. That's what our change management simulator is. That's forecast. Show you what we're going to change, but don't change it. This is real handy to do at 3 in the afternoon while everybody's in the office. Weigh in on the change, make sure they're cool with it before you schedule it for a maintenance window push. And then finally, when you want to enable communication, too often we've seen that, has this change been applied? How did we do it? All that stuff is stuck between a data professional's ears, and we have to create a ticket, send an email. Gosh, wouldn't it be great if you could just open a web browser and figure that out? There should be no barriers to that data. That communication should be easy. And that's what DevOps has shown, that if we allow folks to communicate easily and we share information, we provide visibility, we include everybody at the table, we enforce configuration management, good things happen.
Love it. Okay. Oh, yeah, I also wanted to mention, so I dug into the data and I did one more analysis. Database management isn't differentially important. So what that means, like, sorry, I was like statsy words, right? So, so database management not being differentially important means it's important for every single group. So I went in and I did this analysis because I wanted to see if there was a statistically significant difference for database change management among low, medium, and high performers, right? Because sometimes I talk to groups and we were like, you know, as they start moving faster, maybe they trip up against the database. But then I was talking to other groups and they were like, no, because we're highly, you know, sometimes we're highly transactional. And so we want to attack the database first. Turns out database change management, right? This thing we've been talking about is equally important for every single group.
So it's not, so let me make sure I understand this. So if you are a low performer and you are looking to become a mid-tier performer, it doesn't matter for you that, oh, I have to take care of this first before I tackle the database. It's actually something that whether you're low, medium, or high, it's something that can benefit you. Am I hearing that correctly, or did I get it wrong?
Yep. Basically, like at some point you're going to need to fix the database, right? No matter what. It might depend on what type of business you're in. It's like CI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows you're going to have to fix your continuous integration. Like CI is like version control. Everybody's going to have to get their version control like under control, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's going to have to get their CI under control. Similarly, everybody's going to have to get their database under control. You could do it early, you can do it late, right? Like I actually know a handful of teams that do CI super, super late. I don't know why. It's like, it's fine, right? Because there's like, honestly, there's like 20 things that you have to get under control.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just do them in different orders based on their business model.
Sure.
Database is one of those things. Everybody, this is going to be on everybody's radar because everybody has to deal with data, especially now, right? Data is the new currency. We're all dealing with data. We're all dealing with customer data, transaction data, like IoT, right? We're drowning in data.
Well, I can't imagine a single website that isn't, or application that isn't data driven now. I mean, everything, there's no static pages anymore.
Exactly. And I hear both narratives, right? So some people are going to be like, well, data hasn't gotten in my way yet, right? So that's fine, right? Some people do data later, but I also know several, I've talked to and I've worked with several customers and large organizations who started with data, right? There's no wrong answer. There's only a customized answer, right? People are like, Nicole, where should I start? And I'm like, the answer is always, it depends. But data is going to be a thing, right? So everybody should like,
where do I start?
On your radar, right? Put it on your radar because data is a thing. And doing it right is going to be super important because if you like manual the thing, do the thing manually it's going to be a hard time.
Well, that's what DevOps is teaching us. It's like, look, do your value stream map, find out where the biggest pain point is and address that. Lather, rinse, repeat, keep going.
Exactly. Identify your constraint.
Yeah.
For a process-based view, which is value stream mapping. You can do it from a capabilities-based view, right?
Mm-hmm.
Either way, identify your constraint, rinse and repeat. Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered database. Testing, we also looked into, right? So in the past, we've looked at automated testing, found that was important, of course. This year, we looked at continuous testing to see if kind of an evolution or expansion in automated testing was important. we find that this is indeed important. I don't think we have time to dig into that today, but if anyone's interested in this, I recommend you take a look at the report, because this is an interesting and kind of like very extended exploration into continuous testing, and we do find that this is important and predictive. We also take a look at monitoring and observability as something that's important, and again, an extension into previous research. Prior, we found that monitoring was important. We extend that to look at observability, and we find that teams with comprehensive monitoring and observability were 1.3 times more likely to be an elite performer. A fun stats fact: monitoring and observability load together. For those of you who are on that observability train and want to shoot laser beams out of your eyes at me, I suggest you take a look at the report for the detailed stats discussion of what I mean by that. Go into it in depth.
Hey, and kids, for our listeners at home, if you're gonna bring something to Nicole on Twitter, bring your A game. Back it up with data. She's gonna eat your lunch if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a very nice like discussion limitation, abbreviated because it's not an academic paper, but we do bring some academia limitation discussion section light-ish there to discuss what that might mean, right? Because it was quite interesting that they loaded together. Now, quick deeper analysis. So this is from the report. Anytime you see, here, let me help you, let me help with interpretation here. This is the structure equation model. This was run using PLS, partial least squares. Here's how we read it. Anytime you see a box, this is a construct. It was measured using manifest variables. These are all of the things that we measured in the report. Anything that is rendered in kind of regular font, that's a revalidation of previous research. So we do our best to kind of remeasure and revalidate previous items. Anything that is in bold and all caps, that is new research for this year. So we've tried to cover those briefly, right? Continuous testing, monitoring observability, database, and security. Anytime you see a line and an arrow, this is actually a predictive relationship. We go beyond correlation. Anytime you see a minus sign on an arrow, that's a negative prediction. So continuous delivery helps decrease deployment pain and decrease burnout, which I think is really exciting. So you can see that all of our technical practices help improve continuous delivery, which in turn helps drive and predict STO performance and improve our culture. Our cloud infrastructure helps improve STO performance, and then all of these in turn help improve our organizational performance.
Well, as a former release manager with excessive amount of deployment pain and burnout, I appreciate this slide.
I love this. Well, and we've always wanted to, and much of this confirms, as you can notice, those are not bold, so it confirms prior research. Mm-hmm. We have wanted to investigate that, right? Because much of the promise of DevOps is that it makes our work and our lives better, right? So yes, we want to make technology better and make our companies better and test that. But we also want to make sure that it does actually make the work and the lives of us and our people better, right? Because why make all of these investments if it doesn't make us better?
And look, for all of our executives that are watching this thinking like, well, I don't care about people's lives. Well, guess what? This leads to higher retention. And those people that are happier, they write better software and they do cool things.
Yes, and I will point out, it leads to organizational performance, and org performance is profitability, productivity, market share, effectiveness, efficiency, customer satisfaction. And we also see higher eNPS, right? Employee Net Promoter Score. And employees in high-performing organizations are 2.2 times more likely to recommend their organization as a great place to work. And external research shows that eNPS drives revenues as well. That comes out of, I want to see either Bain or McKinsey. So like it's all a great circle of money if that is all you care about. It's very capitalistic, but I can point you to the great circle of money.
For our execs and our C-level folks, they need at least one line pointing to that.
Yes, there you go. I've got you covered. Okay, now some surprises. Not surprises, but also surprises. For anyone here who insists that they want to release software slow and steady and cautiously, and they will implement extra testing and they will be fine, everything is fine, everything is not fine. Narrator, it was not fine. Some teams optimize for caution. They release code once every 6 months or so. They do implement additional controls so that they have a better fail rate than our low performers. And yet they suffer the consequences. Their time to restore service is 1 to 6 months. And they are 5% of teams.
That doesn't sound very cautious.
And yet, you know what? I speak to a handful of teams around the industry that insist that the old way of releasing software, right, once every 6 months will be fine. Everything will be fine.
It's
We
like
will-
they're
we'll do extra testing. I'm like,
it's like they're trying to build, or make artisanal bespoke beard oil or something instead of getting software out the door, like handmade furniture. It's like, guys, come on.
it doesn't work because when you release code in huge batches, here's the problem. Large batches of software mean you have a huge deploy surface. You have a huge blast radius. And when things break, it takes forever to understand what broke. The debug problem space is huge. Like, look at healthcare.gov. Like, this happened. Look at Sony. They were hacked 4 times in a row. You might get something back up for your customers in hours or days, but the recovery time on the back end is massive. You're
Yep.
recovering infrastructure, you're recovering systems, you're recovering data. It takes weeks or months. It is massive. And everyone is burning out and panicking. It is ugly. This is no way to live. Like, it is bad.
Yeah. So anybody that's saying we're going to go slow to go fast, yeah, you're doing it wrong.
No,
It's
it doesn't work. And we know this. I mean, like, your tech professionals know this. If there are any well-intentioned, and that's why I call them misguided performers, right? It's like, we know you mean well, it is not working. And your tech professionals know this, right? Like, you can't do this, and it's not sustainable. You have to start breaking the problem down into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces so that you can release frequently. Because then when you release a very, very, very tiny piece and it doesn't work, it's very easy to understand what broke. And then when you release a tiny piece, it only touches very, very small pieces of the production system. The blast radius is small. It doesn't cause massive cascading failures because it's a tiny piece, right? The ripple effect is small. The ripple effect of a pebble is small. The ripple effect of a 5-ton boulder is massive. It's very different. Oh, and by the way, misguided performers have the highest use of outsourcing of all groups. Outsourcing is a bad idea. We've known this for years. Now we have the data to back it up, and it is decisive. Low performing teams are almost 4 times as likely to use functional outsourcing. Now I say functional. Functional means you take an entire function, right? All of dev, and you just like throw it over the wall, and then you just wait to get everything back, and then you implement it, which then of course means that you like have gotten an entire something back, and then you deploy it, which is not going to end well. It's not going to be a good time.
Yeah,
now,
so those folks that are outsourcing, oh, we're going to outsource all of production to this services group.
Now, if you instead do things like staff augmentation, where the groups are working at the cadence and the pace of work with your teams internally, and they look like and they work with your teams, that's very different, okay? That's not the same thing. This is another one of the models that we tested this year with lean product management. Again, we see outsourcing negatively impact software delivery performance. Now, J-curve of transformation. I loved this year. Now, this is a reaffirmation of things that we found in the past. We see that manual work is lowest among our high performers, right? High and elite performers do the least amount of manual work. Our medium performers do the most manual work, right? People are like, what? Nicole, you're wrong. Nope. We have seen this more than 1 year in a row. We have seen this again and again and again. Here's why. Teams begin a transformation, you get quick wins, things are going well, you get real excited, and then you like fall into this pit of like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to do. Automation increases test requirements, you respond by doing more manual tests, and then you don't often have the discipline to automate those. You just do more and more and more manual tests. You uncover more technical debt. You also start doing more process. You implement more process to try to contain the complexity you've uncovered. Now, if you can push through that with more relentless improvement, everything is fine, right? So just like keep going, don't back out, everything will be fine. Now, I know you've seen things like this as well in database land, right?
Oh,
like
absolutely.
because database is so complex. We see this in really complex areas.
Mm-hmm. Well, we see this happen in two places. One is, so for example, the first two green circles here, this is our, bringing in application release automation. This is something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's great. We're pushing out the app faster. Well, what that winds up doing is crushing your DBA team. So that velocity gap slide we had earlier, that's what happens. And so a lot of folks look at that and say, well, we shouldn't have even brought in automation. We shouldn't have done this in the first place. And so a lot of folks want to like kind of walk that back. And in reality, it's not about, oh, we're slow on the database side, so we're going to make everybody else slow, and that'll fix the problem. No, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. So you have got to, when you implement DevOps and you find the first area and everything starts working, and then because of your technical debt, because of your bad processes, you've got a problem. Well, the solution isn't to go back to the dark ages. The solution is to fix the new problem. That's what DevOps teaches us. Lather, rinse, repeat. Now, congratulations, you found the next bottleneck. Fix it. Then fix the next one. The problem isn't that you brought in DevOps for the app dev team. The problem is that you have a ton of technical debt. You have this broken process. You need to fix this. And so this idea that, oh, I did it over here, DevOps in this one area, and it highlighted a problem, so now I need to get rid of DevOps. It didn't work. No, it did work. It showed you where your next area was. The other area where we see this is where people start saying, well, I can do this faster myself. And the reality is, no, you can't, because that's not self-service. And you are still requiring a ticket. You're requiring people to wait on you. And what you need to do is, instead of being a bottleneck, instead of being a single point of failure for this release process, you need to enable people to be able to do it themselves. That's how you will get better and get to this, that upper right green circle there. It will get better, but when you run into these problems and you have a little bit of disillusionment, congratulations, that's a good thing. You don't have to do another value stream map because it's clear where the problem is.
Exactly. Okay, great. So major takeaways. Ways that we can improve STO performance. Some big ones, right? Like we kind of ran through a couple here. Essential cloud characteristics is really important to actually get the benefits out of the cloud. We need to make smart investments in key DevOps practices, and these cover technology and process and culture. Holistic transformation is really what's important here. You can't just do one area and skip the rest. The data on functional outsourcing is in, and it's not a winning bet, right? We know it here. Optimize for throughput, stability, availability. I'm going to add one more based on that J-curve transformation and some of the discussions we've had, right? Identify your constraint, right? Do things like value stream mapping. Once you know what your constraint is, get better, right? Understand what's holding you back. It's going to be pretty straightforward. Now, if you want more detail, we barely had time. We are so running out of time. We're over. there's so much goodness in this year's report. So download the report. If you want any more details, there's a lot of goodness in it this year. The report authors this year, myself, Jez Humble, Jean Kim. Many thanks to George Miranda and Javier Velasquez for the contributions. Cheryl Coupe helped us with copy editing, and Siobhan Doyle did design. Many thanks to everyone who helped with research advice and guidance. And so many thanks to all of our sponsors, especially Datical. Thank you so much. I know. And I mean, R2.
We did it, America. We all did it.
You know what? I really loved it because, like, I think this helps highlight the fact that the report is like definitely vendor tool agnostic, right? Like we have a bunch of people like chipping in to make sure that everybody knows how to get better, like with technology, because there's no such thing as like not technology companies. I mean, there are, but like not really, right? If you're doing something that strongly like pushes things forward right now, you're a tech company. And I love the fact that at DORA we're able to do something that is strongly tool and vendor agnostic. So I am super, super thankful for that. Okay, questions?
All right,
Maybe.
great.
I think we've got like 5 minutes, 4 minutes. Sorry, everybody,
Yeah,
I got too excited.
We have less than 5 minutes, so I think we'll be able to get to one or two of them. So I'll go ahead and just jump right on in. The first question, do you also measure or factor in % of times fixing bugs versus developing new features? That's part of
Okay, I am sharing my screen, so I can't jump over to the report right now. We do take a look at percentage of unplanned work and rework, which I think is going to cover not necessarily bug fixes, but I so want to like pull up my report right now. So I have unplanned work and rework, and I have percentage of time spent on customer support work, which is going to be a particular category of bugs. And I have percentage of time spent on defects. Yeah, so which is another particular category of bugs. Yes. Okay. But I don't specifically have bugs that are caught like at different stages throughout the pipeline. And the reason I don't capture that is because different organizations and different teams will categorize those differently.
Well, I think your mean time to resolution stuff really speaks to that. That if you adopt this, you're going to get better at fixing problems. And I think, we know that we're going to get more releases as well, right?
Yeah, but I do have time spent on rework and defects and customer support work, which are different types of bugs and CIEs, customer impacting events. And I do see I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but I do see statistically significant differences. And high performers are spending the least amount of time, followed by medium performers and low performers. And that has been consistent year over year.
All right, great. So let's see if we can squeeze one more question in. With quicker deployments, are organizations sacrificing testing time?
Say that one more time. With
quicker deployments, are organizations sacrificing testing time?
No, they're not sacrificing time, because what they're able to do is be more efficient with their tests, right? They're able to get mass parallelization and serialization of tests, right?
Okay. All right, great. Let's see if we can go ahead.
Really quickly, and they're able to then make more efficient and effective use of their manual testing, right? Because manual testing won't go away. Things like exploratory testing and like user interface testing will still be there, but you're super, super effective and efficient with it. Okay.
All right, great. Let's see if we can get one more question in real quick. Have you seen differences in availability with database type, such as relational versus NoSQL or vendor versus open source?
No, we weren't able to get into that this year. This year was the first year that we did exploratory research, not exploratory, but like the first year that we looked for signal on both availability and database. And so because we had such strong and fantastically predictive signal on those, that's a strong candidate for research next year.
Okay, Great. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for questions. We did receive a ton of questions, so I do want to thank everybody who did submit a question, and know that we have a copy of all the questions. So hopefully
yes.
somebody
Okay, I
will be able
totally
to
answer those.
Okay, so she's totally going to answer them.
Thanks,
which is
everyone.
Awesome. So yes, thank you, Nicole and Rob, for presenting such a great webinar today. And I want to remind the audience that it has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, you will be able to access it on demand. We'll be sending out a link in an email so that you can get to the webinar again. The webinar is also going to be on the DevOps.com website, so be sure to check there if you want to as well. Again, thank you to the audience for joining us today, and this is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody.